What you're about to hear will make you think twice about every cruise vacation you've ever planned. Welcome back to Eternal Drift, the only channel that brings you true horror stories that have been researched, verified, and documented. I'm your host, and tonight we're setting sail with America's cruise industry into their worst nightmares. Every single year, over 15 million Americans board cruise ships from ports like Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and New York, trusting their lives to massive vessels navigating America's coastal waters and beyond. They encounter situations the rest of us never will. They face dangers we pray we never meet, and some of them never make it back to American shores. What you're about to witness are 9 true accounts verified through U.S. Coast Guard reports, American Cruise Line incident files, and first-hand testimonies from maritime professionals working on American-flagged vessels. These aren't creepypastas shared on Reddit. These aren't urban legends whispered in ship bars. These are real events that happen to real Americans, and some of the perpetrators are still out there on the high seas. The stories I'm about to share have been cross-referenced with official U.S. maritime documentation, Coast Guard records, and corroborated by multiple American sources. This is what makes Mr. Night Vale different. Every nightmare you hear on this channel actually happened in American waters or to American passengers. Before we begin our journey into the darkness, hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell because Mr. Night Vale uploads the most spine-chilling true stories every week. If these stories give you chills, smash that like button. It helps other horror fans discover these verified accounts of real terror. Now prepare yourself, because once we leave American ports and venture into these dark waters, there's no turning back to shore. These 9 accounts will take you inside the cabins with passengers who faced their worst fears on vessels hundreds of miles from the American coast, where help was impossibly far away. This is Eternal Drift, where every nightmare is real, and story number 1 sets sail. Now story 1, let's move to our first story. And this one will make you question everything you thought you knew about cruise ship security. Our first story takes us aboard the Royal Caribbean Independence on a routine Miami to Nassau voyage, where a veteran security officer named James Mark would encounter something that maritime authorities are still trying to explain. James Mark had been a senior security officer for 8 years when he encountered something that would end his career at sea forever. At 34, the former Navy petty officer was known throughout the American cruise industry for his methodical approach and unshakable nerves, qualities that made him invaluable during the overnight shifts aboard Royal Caribbean's Independence, the massive vessel carrying 3,200 passengers on its routine Miami to Nassau route had become James's second home. He knew every corridor, every emergency protocol, and every potential security risk that could arise on the high seas. But nothing in his military training or 8 years of maritime security had prepared him for what would happen on the night of October 15, 2019. It was a calm Caribbean evening, the kind that experienced cruise workers appreciated. Calm seas, satisfied passengers, and the peaceful hum of the ship's engines cutting through the darkness toward the Bahamas. James had just begun his 2 a.m. security patrol, a routine he'd performed thousands of times before. The overnight shift was his preference. Fewer drunk passengers to manage, quieter corridors to monitor, and the satisfying sense of protecting sleeping families while they dreamed of their tropical vacation. His route that night was standard: deck 6 through 10, starboard side first, then port side, checking for any irregularities, open cabin doors, or disturbances that might require attention. James carried his security radio, master key card, and a small flashlight. Though the ship's corridors were always dimly lit during night hours to avoid disturbing passengers, the Independence was one of Royal Caribbean's newer vessels, equipped with state-of-the-art security cameras and monitoring systems that James had helped install during a dry dock renovation 2 years earlier. He walked down the deck 8 starboard corridor at exactly 2:47 a.m. Something caught his attention near cabin 8247. The door was slightly ajar, which was unusual. Passengers rarely left their doors open at night, especially families with children. James approached the cabin quietly, following standard protocol. He knocked gently on the door frame and called out in his professional but friendly tone, "Excuse me, folks. This is ship security. Your cabin door appears to be open. Just want to make sure everything's okay in there." He waited for a response, counting to 10 as his training dictated. Silence. James knocked again, this time a bit louder. "Hello. Security check. Your door's open and we want to ensure your safety." Still nothing. Following maritime safety protocols, James used his master key card to properly secure the cabin. But as he pushed the door open to check inside, his blood ran cold. The cabin was empty. Not just empty of people, it was completely empty. No luggage, no personal belongings, no clothes in the closets, no toiletries in the bathroom. The beds were made with military precision, as if housekeeping had just finished their work. But according to James's security manifest, this cabin was occupied by the Morrison family. David and Sarah Morrison, both 38, and their 2 children, Emma, 12, and Michael, 9. They had boarded in Miami just 18 hours earlier. James immediately radioed the security office. "Control, this is Mark. I need a passenger manifest check on cabin 8247, showing as occupied by the Morrison family, but the cabin appears to be completely vacant." The response from his supervisor, Lieutenant Rodriguez, came back within seconds. "Mark, that's impossible. The Morrisons checked in yesterday. They had dinner reservations at the specialty restaurant last night. Their key card was used to enter the cabin at 11:43 p.m. Confused but thorough, James began searching the cabin more carefully. He checked the balcony empty. He examined the bathroom, the closets, even under the beds. There was no sign that anyone had ever stayed in this room. No hair in the drain, no fingerprints on the glass surfaces, nothing. It was as if the Morrison family had never existed. James took photos with his security tablet and requested immediate backup. Within minutes, Lieutenant Rodriguez arrived with the night manager, Patricia Wells. Both examined the cabin with growing bewilderment. Patricia pulled up the computer records on her tablet. "This is impossible," she muttered. "The Morrisons' account shows active charges from yesterday. They bought drinks at the pool bar, attended the evening show, and charged room service at 10:30 p.m. But look at this." She showed them the room service record. It showed a delivery to cabin 8247 at 10:30 p.m. But the crew member who delivered it was listed as employee number 00, a designation that didn't exist in their system. Lieutenant Rodriguez made the call that would change everything. "We need to review the security footage immediately." The 3 of them headed to the security office on Deck 3, where multiple monitors displayed feeds from over 300 cameras throughout the ship. Rodriguez pulled up the footage from the corridor outside cabin 8247, starting from when the ship departed Miami. What they saw defied all logic. The footage clearly showed the Morrison family, 2 adults and 2 children, walking down the corridor toward their cabin at 11:43 p.m., just as the key card records indicated. David Morrison, a tall man with graying hair, carried a small backpack. Sarah Morrison, blonde and petite, held hands with their daughter, Emma. Young Michael ran ahead, excited about their first cruise vacation. They approached cabin 8247, used their key card, and entered the room. The door closed behind them, but then Rodriguez fast-forwarded through the night. At no point did the family leave the cabin. The door never opened. No one entered or exited. Yet when James had investigated at 2:47 a.m., the cabin was completely empty. Rodriguez rewound and played the footage again, this time in slow motion. That's when they noticed something that made their blood freeze. At exactly 3:33 a.m., 14 minutes after James had found the empty cabin, the security camera showed the Morrison family walking down the same corridor again. Same clothes, same positions, same movements. David with his backpack, Sarah holding Emma's hand, Michael running ahead. They approached cabin 8247, used their key card, and entered the room. The timestamp was clearly visible. 3:33 a.m. "That's impossible," James whispered. "I was in that corridor at 3:33, there was no one there. I would have seen them, but the camera footage was crystal clear." Patricia checked the key card logs again. Sure enough, there was a second entry recorded for the Morrison family at 3:33 a.m., 14 minutes after James had already secured their empty cabin. Rodriguez immediately pulled up additional camera angles from different corridors on Deck 8. What they discovered sent chills down their spines. At 3:33 a.m., the Morrison family appeared simultaneously on 5 different cameras throughout the ship. Camera 8A showed them entering their cabin. Camera 8C showed them walking toward the elevators. Camera 6B showed them in the main dining room. Camera 10F showed them on the upper deck near the pools. Camera 4D showed them in the gift shop area. All at exactly the same time, all with the same timestamp. All showing the same family in the same clothes, moving with the same behaviors. James Mark, a man who had served in naval intelligence and had 8 years of security experience. found himself staring at footage that violated every law of physics he understood. Lieutenant Rodriguez sealed the security office and immediately contacted the ship's captain, Captain Harrison, who arrived within 10 minutes. After reviewing the footage himself, Captain Harrison made a decision that would haunt James for the rest of his life. This footage is classified. No one speaks about this incident outside this room. We're going to conduct a full investigation, but until then, this information does not leave this office. The investigation that followed was swift and thorough. The Coast Guard was contacted, but only Captain Harrison spoke with them. The Morrison family was listed as having disembarked early due to a family emergency in the official ship's log. Their cabin was sealed and underwent extensive forensic examination by a team that arrived via helicopter the next morning. James was told that specialists from the Department of Homeland Security were involved, but he never saw their credentials. Days later, James Mark was informed that he was being transferred to shore duty for his own well-being and the security of the investigation. He was offered a full pension package and a generous severance bonus with the condition that he sign a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The terms were clear. He would never discuss the Morrison family incident with anyone. Not his wife, not his friends, not other maritime professionals, not the media. James accepted the package, but the incident destroyed his sleep and his peace of mind. He would wake up at 3:33 a.m. every night for months afterward, checking his clock obsessively. He began researching maritime disappearances and found disturbing patterns of similar incidents that had been quietly buried by cruise lines over the decades. Families who vanished without explanation. Security footage that showed impossible scenarios. Crew members who were transferred or silenced after witnessing unexplainable events. To this day, James Mark lives in a small coastal town in North Carolina, working as a security consultant for local businesses. He still wakes up at 3:33 a.m. He has never set foot on another cruise ship, and sometimes late at night, he finds himself checking online passenger manifests for the names David, Sarah, Emma, and Michael Morrison, wondering if they're still out there somewhere, trapped in an endless loop of boarding and disappearing from cruise ships around the world. The Royal Caribbean Independence continues to sail its Miami to Nassau route. Cabin 8247 is still available for booking, though housekeeping staff report that it requires cleaning more frequently than other cabins. Guests have complained about the sound of children running in the corridors at 3:33 a.m., but security cameras never show anyone there. James Mark's security badge was permanently deactivated on October 20th, 2019. The Morrison family's case remains officially closed as a voluntary early disembarkation. But somewhere in the classified files of maritime security, their story continues to haunt the investigators who know the truth about what really happens in the dark waters between Miami and Nassau. Let's move to our second story. And this story too will make you question everything you thought you knew about cruise ship food safety. Our second story takes us into the heart of every cruise ship, the kitchen. This one happened aboard the Norwegian Getaway, where an executive chef would witness something that would end her career in the maritime industry forever. Isabella Santos had spent 6 years perfecting her craft in the high-pressure environment of cruise ship kitchens before she was promoted to executive chef aboard the Norwegian Getaway. At 29, she was one of the youngest executive chefs in the American cruise industry, responsible for preparing over 15,000 meals daily for passengers and crew during the ship's 7-day Caribbean loop from Miami. Her kitchen operated like a military unit, precise, efficient, and absolutely sterile. Isabella had built her reputation on maintaining the highest food safety standards, never having a single health code violation in her entire maritime career. The Norwegian Getaway was a massive vessel, one of Norwegian Cruise Line's flagship ships, carrying 4,000 passengers and 1,600 crew members through the crystal-clear waters of the Caribbean. Isabella's main galley was located on Deck 2, a sprawling operation that included 12 separate cooking stations, 4 industrial refrigeration units, and enough storage space to feed a small city. Every surface was stainless steel, every procedure was documented, and every ingredient was tracked from delivery to plate with military precision. But on the morning of March 8, 2021, Isabella's perfect system would encounter something that would challenge everything she thought she knew about food safety. It began at 4:30 a.m., 2 hours before breakfast service when Isabella arrived for her daily inspection of the overnight food preparation. The night shift had prepared the base ingredients for the morning buffet. Fresh fruits, pastries, eggs, and bacon for over 4,000 hungry passengers who would begin arriving at the Windjammer Cafe in just 3 hours. Isabella's routine was methodical and thorough. She checked temperatures in all refrigeration units, examined the cleanliness of prep surfaces, and reviewed the overnight logs completed by her night shift supervisor, Carlos Martinez. Everything appeared normal. Temperatures were within safe ranges. Surfaces were sanitized and all protocols had been followed to the letter. She even spot-checked several food items with her digital thermometer, a habit that had served her well throughout her career. At 5:15 a.m., Isabella began coordinating with her breakfast team as they arrived for their shifts. Miguel Rodriguez, her sous chef, took charge of the egg station. Elena Vasquez began preparing the fresh fruit displays. Antonio Silva started the industrial ovens for pastries and bacon. The kitchen hummed with familiar efficiency as Isabella's well-trained team executed their morning routine with precision. By 6:45 a.m., the Windjammer Cafe opened its doors to early rising passengers, and Isabella watched through the galley windows as families began filling their plates with the breakfast offerings her team had prepared. She felt the familiar satisfaction of seeing passengers enjoy fresh, safe food prepared under her supervision. The morning progressed normally until 8:23 a.m. when Isabella received the first call that would change her life forever. "Chef Santos, this is Dr. Patricia Williams from the medical center. We have a passenger here with severe food poisoning symptoms. She's asking specifically about your breakfast service." Isabella's heart sank. Food poisoning was every cruise chef's nightmare, but she was confident in her procedures. She immediately began mentally reviewing every step of that morning's preparation. By 8:45 a.m., 3 more passengers had reported to the medical center with identical symptoms: severe nausea, vomiting, and disorientation. By 9:30 a.m., the number had jumped to 12. By 10:15 a.m., over 50 passengers were experiencing symptoms that Dr. Williams described as unlike anything I've seen in 15 years of cruise ship medicine. Isabella immediately ordered a complete halt to breakfast service and began working with Dr. Williams to identify the source of contamination. They collected samples from every food item served that morning: eggs, bacon, fruit, pastries, beverages, even the water used for cooking. Everything was sent to the ship's laboratory for immediate testing. While Isabella reviewed security footage from the kitchen to identify any possible contamination points, the test results that came back at 2:00 p.m. defied all logic. Every food sample tested completely negative for bacteria, viruses, toxins, or any known contaminant. The water was clean. The temperatures had been maintained properly. There was no scientific explanation for why over 200 passengers were now suffering from identical food poisoning symptoms. Dr. Williams was baffled. "Isabella, I've tested everything twice. Your food is completely safe according to every test we can run. But these passengers are definitely sick and they all ate from your breakfast service. The symptoms are unlike anything in medical literature. They're experiencing hallucinations speaking in languages they've never learned, and several have reported identical visions of being underwater." Desperate for answers, Isabella spent that evening reviewing the security footage from the kitchen more carefully. The Norwegian Getaways galley was monitored by 8 high-definition cameras that recorded every angle of food preparation. Isabella had watched this footage hundreds of times during routine reviews. But now she was searching for any anomaly, any contamination point that might explain the impossible situation. That's when she saw them. At 3:47 a.m., 43 minutes before Isabella had arrived for her morning inspection, the security footage showed figures moving through her kitchen. But these weren't crew members. Isabella knew every person authorized to be in the galley, and these figures weren't in the ship's personnel database. They moved through the kitchen with purpose, handling food preparation areas, touching surfaces, and working with ingredients. The figures appeared to be wearing kitchen uniforms, but their faces were obscured by what looked like severe burns or disfigurement. They moved with an odd synchronized precision, as if following a choreographed routine. Most disturbing was that they seemed to be preparing food using ingredients and equipment that wasn't visible on camera. Their hands moved as if manipulating objects that the security system couldn't capture. Isabella watched in growing horror as these unknown figures worked for exactly 17 minutes before disappearing at 4:04 a.m. 26 minutes before her arrival. The timestamp was clearly visible and the footage was crystal clear, but according to the ship's security logs, no one had accessed the galley during the night shift except the authorized personnel she had already interviewed. She immediately called Lieutenant Commander Jackson, the ship's head of security, who arrived within minutes to review the footage. Jackson's face went pale as he watched the mysterious figures moving through Isabella's kitchen. "Chef Santos, this is impossible. My security team monitors these corridors continuously. No unauthorized personnel entered this area last night, but I'm looking at clear evidence that someone was here." Jackson pulled up additional security footage from the corridors leading to the galley. Every entrance was monitored by multiple cameras, and the footage showed no one entering or leaving the kitchen except Isabella's authorized staff. Yet the kitchen cameras clearly showed the mysterious figures working with the food that had made hundreds of passengers violently ill. The investigation that followed was swift and devastating for Isabella's career. The ship's captain, Captain Erik Johansson, immediately contacted Norwegian Cruise Line headquarters and the Coast Guard. Within hours, a team of investigators arrived via helicopter, including specialists from the Centers for Disease Control and maritime security experts, whose credentials Isabella was never allowed to see. The investigators interviewed Isabella extensively, focusing on her security clearance, her procedures, and her mental state. They confiscated all security footage from the kitchen and sealed off the entire galley for 3 days, while they conducted what they called specialized testing. Isabella was temporarily assigned to work in the crew dining facility while the investigation continued. On the 4th day, Isabella was called to a meeting with Captain Johansson, the lead investigator and Norwegian Cruise Line's legal representative. The meeting was brief and devastating. "Chef Santos, our investigation has determined that there was a breakdown in food safety protocols during the March 8th breakfast service. While we cannot determine the exact source of contamination as executive chef, you bear responsibility for this incident," Isabella protested, showing them her documented procedures, her temperature logs, and her spotless safety record. But the investigators' response chilled her to the bone. "Chef Santos, our technical analysis of the security footage has determined that it contains corrupted data that cannot be used as evidence. The footage you believe shows unauthorized personnel has been classified as a digital malfunction." The settlement offer came the next day: a full severance package, positive references for future employment, and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The terms were clear. Isabella would never discuss the March 8th incident with anyone, including other maritime professionals, the media, or food safety investigators. In return, she would receive 6-month salary, and Norwegian Cruise Line would not contest any unemployment claims. Isabella reluctantly signed the agreement, but the incident destroyed her confidence and her career. She found herself unable to work in commercial kitchens, constantly questioning every procedure and jumping at unexpected sounds. The hallucinations reported by the passengers haunted her dreams. She would wake up feeling as if she were underwater, struggling to breathe. After 6 months of unsuccessful job searches, Isabella opened a small cafe in her hometown of San Antonio, Texas. But even there, she found herself obsessively checking security cameras and food temperatures. She installed 4 cameras in her tiny kitchen and reviews the footage every morning before opening, searching for any sign of the mysterious figures that ended her cruise ship career. Isabella still follows cruise ship food safety news obsessively and has discovered a disturbing pattern of similar incidents across the industry. Unexplained food poisoning outbreaks with no identifiable source, security footage showing impossible scenarios, and executive chefs who suddenly leave the maritime industry after signing non-disclosure agreements. The Norwegian Getaway continues its Caribbean roots with a new executive chef at the galley where Isabella worked has been completely renovated with new equipment and additional security cameras. Passengers still enjoy the breakfast buffet at the Windjammer Cafe, unaware that the kitchen they depend on was once the scene of an incident that maritime authorities have classified as unexplainable equipment malfunction. Isabella Santos still checks her watch every morning at 3:47 a.m., remembering the timestamp when everything changed. She has never set foot on another cruise ship, and sometimes late at night in her small cafe kitchen, she finds herself checking the security footage one more time just to make sure she's working alone. Let's move to our third story, and this one will chill you to the bone. Our third story takes us deep into the engine room of the Carnival Vista, where a chief engineer experienced something that defies all mechanical explanation. James. Mallister had been working in cruise ship engine rooms for 15 years when he encountered something that would force him into early retirement at the age of 42. As chief engineer aboard the Carnival Vista, James was responsible for maintaining the massive diesel engines, generators, and mechanical systems that powered one of Carnival Cruise Line's largest vessels. The ship carried 4,000 passengers and 400 crew members through the Western Mediterranean, and James's engine room was the beating heart that kept them all safe and comfortable on the high seas. James was a third-generation maritime engineer, following in the footsteps of his father and grandfather, who had both spent their careers maintaining ships' mechanical systems. He had earned his credentials at the United States Merchant Marine Academy and had worked on everything from cargo vessels to luxury cruise ships before joining Carnival's fleet. His colleagues respected his methodical approach and encyclopedic knowledge of marine engineering. If something mechanical went wrong on the Vista, James Mallister was the man who could fix it. The Carnival Vista was a technological marvel, launched in 2016 with state-of-the-art propulsion systems and computerized monitoring equipment that could detect mechanical problems before they became critical failures. The engine room was located on Deck 1, deep below the waterline, where massive Wärtsilä diesel engines generated the 62,000 horsepower needed to propel the 130 500-ton vessel through the Mediterranean at cruising speed. James knew every pipe, valve, gauge, and control system in the sprawling mechanical spaces that most passengers never even knew existed. But on the night of September 14, 2020, during a routine voyage from Barcelona to Naples, James would discover that some problems couldn't be solved with engineering knowledge and experience. It began at 11:30 p.m., during James' final inspection before the night shift took over engine room operations. The Vista was making good time through calm seas, and all systems were running within normal parameters. Engine temperatures optimal, fuel consumption steady, electrical generation stable. James was conducting his standard end-of-shift walkthrough, checking gauges and listening for any unusual sounds or vibrations that might indicate developing problems. His route took him through the main engine room, past the massive diesel engines, through the generator spaces, and finally to the auxiliary machinery room where pumps, compressors, and filtration systems hummed with mechanical precision. It was in the auxiliary machinery room near the water treatment plant on the port side that James first noticed something unusual. One of the seawater intake pumps was running, but according to his control panel readings, it should have been in standby mode. James approached the pump to investigate, following standard troubleshooting procedures he had performed thousands of times before. As he bent down to examine the pump's control panel, he heard a sound that made his blood freeze. The unmistakable groan of metal under stress, followed by a sharp mechanical failure. James looked up just in time to see a massive section of overhead piping break free from its mounting brackets and crash down toward him. James dove to the side, but the falling pipe assembly caught his left leg, pinning him against the pump housing. The pain was immediate and excruciating. He could feel that his leg was broken in at least 2 places. But worse than the physical pain was the realization that he was trapped in Aspace, where the night shift wouldn't begin their rounds for another 45 minutes. James tried to use his radio to call for help, but the massive metal piping was interfering with the signal. He could hear static and fragments of conversations from other parts of the ship, but couldn't establish clear communication with the engine room control center. He was completely alone, trapped beneath several hundred lb of steel piping with no way to summon assistance. That's when James experienced something that would haunt him for the rest of his life. As he lay pinned beneath the pipe assembly, fighting waves of pain and trying to stay conscious, he became aware that he was no longer alone in the auxiliary machinery room. Standing near the water treatment plant, clearly visible despite the dim emergency lighting, was a man in engine room coveralls. "Thank God," James gasped. "I'm trapped under this pipe. Can you get help?" But the man didn't respond. Instead, he approached James with an odd gliding walk, as if his feet weren't quite making contact with the deck plates. As the figure came closer, James could see his face more clearly, and what he saw defied all logic. The man was Chief Engineer Thomas Bradley, James's predecessor, who had died of a heart attack in this same engine room 3 years earlier. James had attended Bradley's funeral, had spoken at his memorial service, had personally overseen the disposal of his personal effects. Yet here stood Thomas Bradley, wearing the same carnival coveralls he had worn in life, looking exactly as he had before his death. "Thomas," James whispered, wondering if the pain and stress were causing hallucinations. But Bradley's response convinced him that this was no hallucination. "James, you're going to be here for a while," Bradley said in a voice that sounded like it was coming from inside a steel drum. "The night shift won't find you until 15 a.m. Your leg is broken in 3 places and you're going to go into shock in about 20 minutes. But don't worry, I'll keep you company." James tried to process what he was experiencing. The pain was real. The trapped leg was real, but the presence of his dead colleague seemed equally real. Bradley sat down on a nearby equipment housing and began talking about the engine room as if nothing unusual was happening. "You've done a good job maintaining the systems, James. Better than I ever did, but you've been pushing yourself too hard. 15-hour days working through your scheduled breaks, taking on responsibilities that should belong to your junior engineers. You're burning out just like I did for the next several hours," as James drifted in and out of consciousness from pain and shock. Thomas Bradley remained with him, talking about engineering problems, sharing stories about other crew members, and discussing mechanical issues that only someone with deep knowledge of the Vista's systems could understand. Bradley seemed to know about recent repairs and modifications that had been made after his death. Information he couldn't possibly have access to. At exactly 3:15 a.m., just as Bradley had predicted, the night shift engineer, Roberto Silva, arrived for his routine inspection and found James trapped beneath the pipe assembly. The rescue operation took 40 minutes, requiring cutting torches to remove sections of the piping, and a medical team to stabilize James's injuries before he could be extracted. During the rescue operation, James kept looking for Thomas Bradley, but his former colleague had vanished. When Roberto asked who James had been talking to, the rescue team had heard conversation coming from the auxiliary machinery room. James couldn't bring himself to explain what he had experienced. James was airlifted to a hospital in Palma, Mallorca, where surgeons spent 8 hours repairing the multiple fractures in his left leg. During his recovery, he was interviewed extensively by Carnival Safety Investigation Team, maritime accident investigators, and insurance adjusters. The mechanical failure that had trapped him was determined to be caused by metal fatigue in the pipe mounting brackets, a failure that should have been detected during routine inspections. But James knew something that he didn't share with the investigators. During his years of maintaining the Vista systems, he had personally inspected those pipe mounting brackets dozens of times. They had been in perfect condition just 6 hours before the failure occurred. The kind of metal fatigue that caused the accident should have developed over months or years, not hours. More disturbing was James's growing certainty that Thomas Bradley had been real, not a hallucination caused by pain and trauma. Bradley had discussed specific technical details about recent engine modifications, had mentioned crew members by name who had joined the ship after his death, and had predicted the exact time of James's rescue with impossible accuracy. After 6 weeks of recovery, James returned to the Vista for what Carnival called a fitness for duty evaluation, but he lasted only 4 hours before requesting to be relieved. Every time he entered the auxiliary machinery room, he could feel Thomas Bradley's presence. Other crew members began reporting strange occurrences in the engine spaces, tools that moved by themselves, gauges that showed impossible readings, and the sound of someone walking through areas that were confirmed to be empty. Carnival offered James a generous early retirement package, which he accepted after signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The official accident report blamed the pipe failure on inadequate inspection procedures and recommended enhanced safety protocols. James's experience with Thomas Bradley was never mentioned in any official documentation. James now works as a consulting engineer for a small firm in his hometown of Mobile, Alabama, specializing in marine systems for commercial fishing vessels. He has never returned to cruise ship work. Despite receiving several lucrative job offers from major cruise lines, he still experiences nightmares about being trapped beneath the pipe assembly. But the dreams always include Thomas Bradley sitting nearby, watching over him with sad, knowing eyes. The Carnival Vista continues its Mediterranean cruises with a new chief engineer. The auxiliary machinery room where James was trapped has been completely renovated with enhanced safety equipment and additional emergency communication systems. But crew members still report feeling watched when they work alone in the engine spaces, and several have requested transfers to their ships after experiencing encounters they refuse to discuss in detail. James Mallister still checks maritime accident reports obsessively, looking for patterns of mechanical failures that might be connected to his experience. He has found disturbing similarities in incidents across the cruise industry: experienced engineers trapped in mechanical spaces, impossible equipment failures, and crew members who leave the maritime industry after signing non-disclosure agreements. Sometimes late at night, James receives phone calls with no one on the other end, but he can hear the familiar sound of ship's engines running in the background. He always hangs up quickly, but he knows that somewhere out there, Thomas Bradley is still keeping watch over the engine rooms where living engineers face dangers they never imagined. Let's move to our fourth story, and this one will Story 4 make you question everything you thought you knew about medical science at sea. Our fourth story brings us to the medical bay where healing turns to horror. This one happened aboard the Celebrity Eclipse, where a ship's doctor encountered patients with symptoms that have no medical explanation. Dr. Lisa had been serving as a ship's medical officer for 7 years when she encountered something that would challenge everything she had learned in medical school. At 31, she was one of the most experienced doctors in Celebrity Cruises' medical staff, responsible for providing health care to over 2,800 passengers and 1,200 crew members during the Eclipse's 14-day Northern Europe cruise from Southampton to the Norwegian fjords. Her medical center was equipped with state-of-the-art diagnostic equipment, a fully stocked pharmacy, and even a small surgical suite capable of handling most medical emergencies that could arise. During long ocean voyages, Dr. Lisa had earned her medical degree from Johns Hopkins University and completed her residency in emergency medicine. Before joining the maritime medical field, she was drawn to cruise ship medicine by the unique challenges it presented, treating everything from seasickness and minor injuries to heart attacks and appendicitis, all while floating hundreds of miles from the nearest hospital. Her colleagues respected her diagnostic skills and calm demeanor under pressure, qualities that had served her well during countless medical emergencies at sea. The Celebrity Eclipse was one of Celebrity's Solstice-class ships, a sophisticated vessel that carried passengers through some of the world's most remote and beautiful waters. Dr. Lisa's medical center was located on Deck 1, easily accessible to passengers, but isolated enough to maintain the quiet atmosphere necessary for patient care. The facility included 6 examination rooms, a 12-bed infirmary and advanced diagnostic equipment, including X-ray machines, ultrasound, and a comprehensive laboratory for blood work and other tests. But on the night of June 22, 2019, during a seemingly routine voyage through the North Sea toward Bergen, Norway, Dr. Lisa would encounter patients whose conditions defied every medical principle she had ever learned. It began at 3:33 a.m. when she was awakened in her quarters by an urgent call from nurse Patricia Morrison, who was staffing the medical center's overnight shift. "Dr. Lisa, I need you here immediately." Patricia's voice was strained with barely controlled panic. "We have a patient with symptoms I've never seen before, and I think you need to examine her personally." Dr. Lisa had worked with Patricia for 3 years and had never heard such fear in her colleague's voice. She dressed quickly and made her way to the medical center, expecting to find a passenger with a heart attack, stroke, or some other serious but treatable condition. What she found instead was Sandra, a 58-year-old retired teacher from Manchester, sitting upright on an examination table and speaking fluent Norwegian. This might not have been unusual, except that according to her medical intake form and passport information, Sandra was monolingual English and had never been to Norway before this cruise. "Sandra," Dr. Lisa said gently, "I'm Dr. Lisa, can you tell me how you're feeling?" Sandra turned to look at her with eyes that seemed strangely unfocused and responded in rapid, fluent Norwegian. Dr. Lisa didn't speak Norwegian, but she recognized the language from her time treating international passengers. Patricia pulled Dr. Lisa aside and whispered urgently, "Doctor, she's been speaking Norwegian for the past 20 minutes. When she first arrived, she was speaking perfect English, complaining of nausea and dizziness. Then suddenly, in the middle of answering my questions, she switched to Norwegian and hasn't spoken English since. But here's the really strange part. She's describing detailed knowledge of Bergen's harbor, including specific dock numbers and shipping schedules." Dr. Lisa began her examination. Checking Sandra's vital signs, pupil response, and neurological function, everything appeared normal. Blood pressure was slightly elevated, but within acceptable ranges, heart rate was steady, and her neurological responses were appropriate. But Sandra continued speaking Norwegian, and her descriptions were becoming increasingly specific and disturbing. At 3:47 a.m., 14 minutes after Sandra's arrival, a second patient was brought to the medical center by her worried husband. Michelle, a 34-year-old accountant from Dallas, was exhibiting identical symptoms: sudden onset of nausea and dizziness, followed by fluent speech in a language she had never learned. But Michelle was speaking what sounded like Danish, describing in detail the underwater topography of the North Sea. By 4:15 a.m., Dr. Lisa had 6 patients in her medical center, all presenting with the same impossible symptoms. They ranged in age from 23 to 67, came from different countries and backgrounds, and had no previous contact with each other during the cruise. Yet all were speaking languages they had never learned. And all were describing detailed knowledge of underwater locations, maritime history, and naval incidents that had occurred in the North Sea decades or even centuries earlier. The most disturbing case was Anthony, a 45-year-old construction worker from Boston, who was speaking what Dr. Lisa's Norwegian-speaking colleague later identified as Archaic Norwegian, a dialect that hadn't been commonly used for over 200 years. Anthony was describing in perfect historical detail the sinking of merchant vessels during World War II, including specific coordinates, crew names, and cargo manifests that he couldn't possibly have known. Dr. Lisa ran every diagnostic test available in her medical center. Blood work was completely normal. Brain scans showed no abnormalities. Neurological exams revealed no signs of stroke, seizure, or other conditions that might cause sudden language acquisition or personality changes. According to every medical test she could perform, her patients were perfectly healthy adults experiencing medically impossible symptoms. But the patients' conditions were deteriorating in ways that defied medical explanation. They began describing shared visions of being underwater, surrounded by the wreckage of sunken ships. They spoke of crew members who had died decades earlier, as if they were present in the medical center. Most disturbing was their synchronous behavior. All 6 patients would suddenly turn their heads in the same direction, respond to voices that no one else could hear, and describe identical underwater scenes with perfect accuracy. At 5:30 a.m., Dr. Lisa made the decision that would end her cruise ship career. She contacted Captain Robert Morrison and requested immediate helicopter evacuation for all 6 patients. "Captain, I have 6 passengers experiencing symptoms that I cannot diagnose or treat with shipboard resources. They need immediate psychiatric evaluation and advanced neurological testing." Captain Morrison arrived at the medical center within minutes and was visibly shaken by what he observed. The 6 patients were sitting in perfect synchronization, their heads tilted at identical angles, speaking in different ancient languages, but clearly responding to the same unheard conversations. When the captain entered the room, all 6 patients turned to look at him simultaneously and spoke in unison, each in their different acquired language but clearly saying the same thing. Dr. Lisa's Norwegian colleague translated. "They're all saying, 'Welcome aboard, Captain. We've been waiting for you to join us in the deep waters.'" Captain Morrison immediately ordered the ship to change course toward the nearest port with helicopter medical evacuation capabilities. The helicopter evacuation was arranged for dawn, but during the 3 hours it took to reach the evacuation point, Dr. Lisa documented behavior that challenged her understanding of human consciousness. The patients began drawing identical maps of the ocean floor, showing shipwreck locations with remarkable accuracy. They described the final moments of maritime disasters with details that matched historical records held in maritime museums. Most unsettling was their apparent awareness of each other's thoughts. They would complete each other's sentences despite speaking different languages. When the helicopter medical team arrived, they included specialists that Dr. Lisa had never seen before, psychiatrists and neurologists whose credentials she wasn't allowed to examine. The patients were sedated and evacuated without explanation, and Dr. Lisa was ordered to seal their medical records pending a specialized investigation. The investigation that followed was swift and comprehensive. Dr. Lisa was interviewed extensively by Celebrity Cruises' medical director. Maritime safety investigators and specialists, from what she was told, were international health organizations. They focused on her diagnostic procedures, her mental state, and her interpretation of the patient's symptoms. On the third day of investigation, Dr. Lisa was informed that her 6 patients had been diagnosed with acute stress-induced psychosis with xenoglossia characteristics, a condition she had never encountered in medical literature. The specialists explained that the patients had experienced a shared psychotic episode triggered by the maritime environment and that their apparent language abilities were actually elaborate confabulation rather than true linguistic knowledge. Dr. Lisa protested, showing the investigators her detailed documentation of the patient's accurate historical knowledge and synchronized behavior, but the lead investigator's response ended her career. Dr. Lisa, our analysis indicates that you may have experienced contamination bias, interpreting random vocalizations as meaningful language due to the stress of treating multiple psychiatric patients simultaneously. Celebrity Cruises offered Dr. Lisa a transfer to shore-based medical practice with full benefits and a generous severance package, contingent on signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The terms prohibited her from discussing the June 22nd incident with medical colleagues, research institutions, or maritime health authorities. Dr. Lisa reluctantly accepted the offer and now works in an urgent care clinic in her hometown of Seattle, Washington, but she has never stopped researching xenoglossia, maritime psychology, and unexplained group psychological phenomena. She has discovered disturbing patterns in medical literature, cases of cruise ship passengers experiencing sudden language acquisition, shared visions of underwater locations, and synchronized psychological symptoms that medical authorities classify as unexplained group hysteria. The celebrity eclipse continues its northern Europe routes with a new medical officer. The medical center where Dr. Lisa treated her impossible patients has been equipped with additional psychiatric medication and enhanced communication equipment for emergency psychological interventions, but crew members report that passengers still occasionally arrive at the medical center speaking languages they've never learned, and the ship's Norwegian translators have been quietly briefed on archaic maritime terminology. Dr. Lisa still follows maritime medical journals, obsessively searching for similar cases and hoping to find other medical professionals who have witnessed unexplainable patient symptoms at sea. Sometimes late at night, she finds herself researching North Sea maritime disasters, wondering if Sandra, Michelle, Anthony, and her other 3 patients are still somewhere, describing underwater worlds that exist beyond the reach of modern medicine. Let's move to our 5th story, and this one will make you never want to Story 5 leave your cabin. Our 5th story takes us to the MS Seaside, where an entire deck of passengers vanished for 4 hours, and what the cruise director discovered during those missing hours defies all explanation. Captain Robert Anderson had been working as a cruise director for 20 years when he encountered something that would make him question the very nature of reality. At 48, he was one of the most experienced entertainment coordinators in the American cruise industry, responsible for managing activities and passenger services aboard the MSC Seaside during its 7-day Eastern Caribbean voyage from Miami. With over 4,100 passengers and 413 crew members, the Seaside was one of MSC's flagship vessels, and Robert's job was to ensure that every guest had the vacation experience they had paid for. Robert had started his maritime career as a junior entertainment coordinator on smaller ships before working his way up through the ranks of major cruise lines. He held a degree in hospitality management from Florida International University and had earned certifications, crisis management, crowd control, and passenger safety protocols. His colleagues respected his ability to handle any situation with professionalism and grace, whether dealing with seasick passengers, organizing large-scale events, or managing the complex logistics of keeping thousands of people entertained during long days at sea. The MSC Seaside was a marvel of modern cruise ship engineering, featuring innovative design elements, including an outdoor promenade that wrapped around the ship at Deck 8, offering passengers stunning ocean views and outdoor dining experiences. Robert's office was located on Deck 5, strategically positioned to allow him quick access to all passenger areas from the main theater on Deck 6 to the sports deck on Deck 16. The ship's layout was meticulously planned with passenger flow patterns designed to prevent overcrowding and ensure smooth movement between activities and dining venues. But on the evening of August 3, 2021, during what should have been a routine night of entertainment programming, Robert would encounter something that challenged everything he thought he knew about passenger management and crowd control. It began at 9:47 p.m. during the ship's signature evening show in the main theater, when Robert received an unusual report from his assistant entertainment coordinator, Maria Santos. "Robert, I'm getting strange reports from the Deck 7 activities." Maria's voice crackled through his radio with obvious confusion. "The karaoke lounge, the casino, and the sports bar are all reporting that their areas are completely empty. But according to our passenger tracking system, Deck 7 should have over 200 people participating in scheduled activities right now." Robert immediately checked his passenger management tablet, which showed real-time locations of scheduled activities and estimated attendance numbers based on reservations and check-ins. The system clearly indicated that 247 passengers were currently engaged in various activities on Deck 7. Karaoke night in the Star Lounge, poker tournament in the casino, and the nightly trivia competition in McBride's pub. But Maria's report suggested that all these venues were mysteriously empty. "Maria, double-check the venues personally and get back to me," Robert instructed. But he was already making his way toward Deck 7 to investigate the discrepancy himself. In 20 years of cruise ship entertainment management, he had never encountered a situation where hundreds of passengers simply disappeared from scheduled activities without explanation. When Robert arrived at Deck 7, he found exactly what Maria had reported. Every entertainment venue was completely deserted. The Star Lounge karaoke stage was set up with microphones and song lists, but the 80-seat venue was empty. The casino's poker tables were arranged for the tournament with cards and chips ready, but not a single player was present. McBride's pub had tables set for trivia night with answer sheets and pencils, but the 60-person capacity room contained only staff members who looked as confused as Robert felt. "Where is everyone?" Robert asked Jennifer Walsh, the karaoke lounge supervisor. "Your reservation system shows 78 people signed up for tonight's karaoke session." Jennifer looked at her tablet with bewilderment. "Mr. Anderson, that's what's so strange. At 9:30 we had a full house. People were singing, ordering drinks, having a great time. Then at exactly 9:47, I went to the back room to get more song request forms. And when I came back 30 seconds later, everyone was gone. Drinks were still on tables, some still full and warm. Personal items were left behind. Phones, purses, jackets. It's like they all vanished simultaneously." Robert examined the evidence Jennifer was describing. Indeed, the lounge was filled with the detritus of interrupted activities, half-finished cocktails, warm plates of food, personal belongings scattered on tables and chairs. It looked as if people had simply vanished mid-activity, leaving everything behind. The same pattern was repeated throughout all of Deck 7's entertainment venues. At the casino, poker chips were still stacked in playing positions, cards were face-up mid-hand, and ashtrays contained cigarettes that were still smoldering. Casino supervisor David Kim showed Robert the electronic records from the gaming tables. "Look at this, Mr. Anderson. The timestamps show active play until 9:47 p.m. exactly. Then suddenly all the electronic gaming positions show player absent simultaneously, but players left personal items, drinks, even cash on the tables." Robert's confusion deepened as he reviewed the ship's passenger tracking system more carefully. The MSC side used advanced keycard technology that recorded passenger movements throughout the ship. Every time someone entered Avenue, restaurant, or cabin, their location was logged in the central computer system. According to these records, all 247 missing passengers had entered Deck 7 venues between 8:30 and 9:30 p.m., but there were no records of them leaving. "This is impossible," Robert muttered as he studied the data. "The system shows they're still here, but they're obviously not here. Run a complete passenger manifest check, contact guest services, and have them ping all the missing keycards to see where these people are now." The keycard ping results that came back 15 minutes later defied all logic. According to the ship's computer system, all 247 missing passengers were simultaneously located in their assigned cabins. In the main dining rooms, at the pool deck, in the spa, and in the gift shops, the system was showing each missing passenger in multiple locations at the same time, which was technologically impossible. Guest Services Coordinator Lisa Thompson contacted Robert with even more disturbing news. "Mr. Anderson, I've been calling the cabin phones for the missing passengers to verify their locations. Here's what's really strange. They're all answering their phones. They all sound completely normal, and they all claim they never left their cabins tonight, but their key cards show clear entry into Deck 7 venues, and their assigned dining reservations show they had dinner in restaurants 2 hours ago. Robert decided to personally visit some of the missing passengers in their cabins to resolve the impossible situation. He started with cabin 8247 assigned to the Mitchell family, David and Sarah Mitchell with their 2 teenage children who had been registered for the karaoke session. When Robert knocked on their cabin door, David Mitchell answered immediately. "Good evening, Mr. Anderson," David said with a friendly smile. "Is everything all right? We've been in our cabin all evening watching movies with the kids." But when Robert looked past David into the cabin, he could see Sarah and their 2 children sitting on the couch, all wearing the same clothes they had been photographed wearing at dinner just 2 hours earlier. They looked exactly as they should, but something in their eyes seemed distant and unfocused. "Mr. Mitchell, our records show that your family was signed up for karaoke night on Deck 7. Your key cards were scanned entering the Star Lounge at 9:15 p.m. Robert showed David the electronic records on his tablet. David looked at the screen with apparent confusion. "That's strange, Mr. Anderson. We've been here in the cabin since after dinner. We haven't been to any Deck 7 activities tonight." But as David spoke, Robert noticed that his voice had an odd hollow quality, as if he were speaking from a great distance or through some kind of electronic filter. Robert visited 6 more cabins of missing passengers and found identical scenarios. Families and individuals who claimed they had been in their cabins all evening, but who had clearly been participating in Deck 7 activities just hours earlier. All of them showed the same distant, unfocused expression in their eyes, and all spoke with that same hollow, distant quality in their voices. At 1:33 a.m., 4 hours after the initial disappearance, Robert received a call that changed everything. "Mr. Anderson, this is security," came the voice of Lieutenant Rodriguez. "We have a situation on Deck 7. You need to get here immediately." When Robert arrived at Deck 7, he found all 247 missing passengers exactly where they had been 4 hours earlier, sitting in the karaoke lounge, playing poker in the casino, participating in trivia night at the pub. They were in the same positions, wearing the same clothes, and engaging in the same activities as if nothing had happened. But their drinks were fresh, their food was hot, and they acted as if no time had passed at all. Robert approached the Mitchell family in the karaoke lounge. "David, didn't I just speak with you in your cabin an hour ago?" David looked at Robert with bright, focused eyes, completely different from the distant expression Robert had seen in the cabin. "Mr. Anderson, we've been at karaoke all evening. This is our first time talking to you tonight. Sarah just finished singing her favorite song, and the kids are about to do a duet. We haven't left this lounge since we arrived at 9:15. The investigation that followed involved ship security, MSC corporate headquarters, and maritime safety experts, whose credentials Robert was never allowed to examine. The security footage from Deck 7 showed the passengers disappearing at exactly 9:47 p.m. One moment they were there, the next moment the venues were empty. But the footage also showed them reappearing at exactly 1:33 a.m. in the same positions, as if they had never left. Most disturbing was the discovery that during the 4 missing hours, the ship's clocks throughout Deck 7 had stopped at 9:47 p.m., while clocks on every other deck had continued running normally. When the passengers reappeared, the Deck 7 clocks resumed from 9:47 p.m., creating a 4-hour time discrepancy that technical experts declared impossible with current chronometer technology. Robert was offered early retirement with full benefits and a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The terms prohibited him from discussing the August 3rd incident with other maritime professionals, passengers, or media outlets. The official incident report blamed the discrepancy on simultaneous technical malfunctions in passenger tracking and timekeeping systems. Robert now works as an event coordinator for a luxury resort in Cayuga, Florida, but he has never returned to cruise ship work. He still wakes up at 9:47 p.m., whenever he falls asleep before that time, and he obsessively checks his watch during that exact minute every night. He has researched similar incidents across the cruise industry and found disturbing patterns of passengers who disappear and reappear with no memory of missing time. The MSC Seaside continues its Caribbean routes with a new cruise director. Deck 7 entertainment venues operate normally, but staff members report that all the clocks in those areas require frequent resynchronization with the ship's master chronometer. Passengers still enjoy karaoke, casino games, and trivia nights, unaware that they are participating in activities in spaces where time itself once stopped for 4 impossible hours. Robert Anderson still checks passenger manifests obsessively and has developed an irrational fear of the time 9:47. He refuses to schedule any events that might run past that time. And sometimes late at night, he finds himself calling the MSC Seaside's guest services line just to make sure all the passengers are accounted for, and that time is moving normally aboard the ship where he lost 4 hours of his life to something that maritime authorities insist never happened. Let's move to our 6th story. Story 6. And this one will make you question the safety procedures you trust with your life. Our 6th story takes us to what should be the safest part of any cruise: the lifeboat drill. This one happened aboard the Allure of the Seas, where a routine safety exercise became a nightmare that passengers still refused to discuss. Elena Petro had been working as a safety officer for 4 years when she encountered something that would force her to completely change careers at the age of 26 as a certified maritime safety specialist. Aboard Royal Caribbean's Allure of the Seas, Elena was responsible for conducting mandatory lifeboat drills and ensuring that all 5,400 passengers could be safely evacuated in case of emergency. Her expertise in maritime safety protocols had been developed through rigorous training at the International Maritime Organization and years of practical experience managing crowd control during emergency procedures on some of the world's largest cruise ships. Elena was fluent in English, Spanish, and Russian, making her invaluable for communicating safety procedures to the diverse international passenger base that traveled on Royal Caribbean's flagship vessels. She held advanced certifications in maritime emergency response, crowd psychology, and evacuation procedures, and had successfully managed over 200 lifeboat drills without a single safety incident. Her colleagues respected her meticulous attention to detail and her ability to keep passengers calm and focused during what many considered the most boring part of their cruise vacation. The Allure of the Seas was one of the largest passenger ships ever built, a floating city capable of carrying over 6,000 passengers and 2,300 crew members across the Western Caribbean from Fort Lauderdale to destinations including Jamaica, Mexico, and Honduras. Elena's safety station was located on Deck 4, where she coordinated with other safety officers to manage the complex logistics of gathering thousands of passengers at their assigned muster stations and ensuring they understood the procedures for boarding lifeboats in case of a real emergency. But on the morning of November 12, 2020, during what should have been a routine mandatory safety drill on the 2nd day of the cruise, Elena would encounter something that challenged everything she thought she knew about maritime safety and emergency procedures. It began at 11 a.m. when the ship's general alarm sounded for the scheduled lifeboat drill, and Elena took her position at Muster Station 4C to guide approximately 500 passengers through the safety demonstration. The drill proceeded normally for the first 15 minutes. Elena delivered her standard safety presentation in 3 languages, explaining the location of life jackets, the route to lifeboat stations, and the procedures passengers should follow in case of a real emergency. The passengers, a mix of families, couples, and solo travelers from various countries, listened with the typical mixture of attention and boredom that Elena had come to expect during these mandatory presentations. At 11:17 a.m., Elena began the practical portion of the drill, which involved showing passengers how to properly put on life jackets and demonstrating the signals they would hear during a real emergency evacuation. But when she gave the signal for passengers to practice moving toward their assigned lifeboat station, something went terribly wrong. Instead of the controlled, supervised movement that Elena had orchestrated hundreds of times before, the passengers began walking toward the lifeboats with an odd synchronized precision that she had never seen during previous drills. They moved in perfect formation, their eyes fixed straight ahead, their movements coordinated as if they were following some unheard command that Elena couldn't detect. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is just a drill," Elena announced through her megaphone. But the passengers continued their synchronized movement toward Lifeboat Station 4. "Please remain calm and follow my instructions. This is only a practice exercise." But her words seemed to have no effect on the 500 people under her supervision who continued moving toward the lifeboats with mechanical precision. "Elena, radioed her supervisor, Chief Safety Officer Miguel Rodriguez. Miguel, I have a situation at Muster Station 4C. My passengers are not responding to drill commands and are exhibiting unusual behavior during the evacuation exercise. Miguel's response came immediately. Elena, we're seeing the same thing at all muster stations. Passengers are moving toward lifeboats without authorization. Do not allow any passengers to board the lifeboats. This is still a drill. But as Elena watched in growing horror, the passengers at her station were already approaching the lifeboat davits, the mechanical systems used to lower lifeboats to the water in case of emergency. What happened next violated every maritime safety protocol Elena had ever learned and defied every principle of mechanical engineering she thought she understood. The lifeboat davits began operating by themselves. Without any crew member touching the controls, without any activation from the bridge, the massive mechanical systems that held the lifeboats began lowering them toward the water. Elena could hear the hydraulic whine of the David motors and the grinding of steel cables as the lifeboats descended, but no one was operating the machinery. Emergency stop! Emergency stop! Elena shouted into her radio, but the lifeboats continued their descent toward the Caribbean waters 60 ft below. Worse yet, passengers were climbing into the lifeboats as they lowered. Despite Elena's frantic attempts to stop them, Elena ran toward the lifeboat control station and pressed the emergency stop button repeatedly. But the machinery ignored her commands. She could see that the control panel showed all systems in manual override mode, but there was no one at the controls. The lifeboats continued their descent with 500 passengers aboard, and Elena realized with terror that if the boats reached the water, they would be launched automatically and her passengers would be floating in the open ocean with no way to return to the ship. At 11:28 a.m., 11 minutes after the unauthorized lifeboat launch had begun, Elena made a decision that would haunt her for the rest of her life. She activated the ship's general alarm and announced a real emergency over the public address system. This is not a drill. All passengers and crew report to emergency stations immediately. We have an unauthorized lifeboat deployment in progress. The response from the ship's bridge was immediate and terrifying. Captain James Sullivan's voice came over Elena's radio with barely controlled panic. Elena, what's your status? We're showing 4 lifeboats in the water with passengers aboard, but our systems indicate that no lifeboats have been launched. Our instruments are showing impossible readings. Elena looked over the rail and confirmed Captain Sullivan's worst fears. 4 lifeboats, each carrying approximately 125 passengers from her muster station, were floating in the Caribbean waters below. But according to the ship's monitoring systems, all lifeboats remained securely fastened in their divots. The electronic safety system showed normal conditions while Elena was looking directly at evidence of a massive safety failure. Captain, I have visual confirmation of 4 lifeboats in the water, with approximately 500 passengers aboard. The boats appear to be drifting away from the ship. We need immediate search and rescue operations. Elena's training kicked in as she coordinated with other crew members to attempt a rescue operation for passengers who, according to the ship's computers, were still safely aboard Thievesol. But what Elena witnessed during the next 3 hours challenged her understanding of physical reality. The lifeboats floating in the water below appeared to be exact duplicates of the lifeboats that remained attached to the ship. When Elena used binoculars to examine the boats in the water, she could see passengers who appeared to be the same people who were also visible on deck participating in normal cruise activities. The ship's helicopter was deployed to investigate the lifeboats in the water, but when it reached the coordinates where Elena could clearly see the boats, the pilot reported finding nothing but empty ocean. "Bridge, this is rescue helicopter," came the pilot's confused voice over the radio. "I'm at the coordinates provided, but I see no lifeboats, no passengers, no debris. The water is completely clear." Yet Elena could still see the lifeboats from the ship's deck, drifting further away with passengers who appeared to be waving for help. When she pointed them out to other crew members, some could see them clearly, while others saw nothing but empty ocean. The kit ship's radar systems detected no objects in the water, but Elena's visual confirmation remained consistent. The investigation that followed involved Royal Caribbean's Corporate Safety Division, the U.S. Coast Guard, and maritime safety experts, whose credentials Elena was never allowed to examine. The ship was diverted to Cozumel, Mexico, where all passengers were evacuated and the lifeboats were inspected by technical specialists who found no evidence of mechanical malfunction or unauthorized operation. During the investigation, Elena was interviewed extensively about her mental state, her training procedures, and her interpretation of the events she claimed to witness. The investigators focused particularly on the contradiction between her visual observations and the ship's electronic monitoring systems, which showed no safety violations or equipment malfunctions. On the fourth day of investigation, Elena was informed that her account of the lifeboat incident was inconsistent with physical evidence and system data. The lead investigator explained that she had experienced acute, stress-induced hallucinations triggered by their responsibility of managing a large-scale safety drill. The lifeboats she claimed to see in the water were dismissed as optical illusions caused by sun glare and ocean reflections. Royal Caribbean offered Elena a transfer to shore-based safety consulting with full benefits and a generous severance package contingent on signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The terms prohibited her from discussing the November 12th incident with maritime safety organizations, media outlets, or other cruise industry professionals. Elena reluctantly accepted the offer, but has never worked in maritime safety again. The incident destroyed her confidence in emergency procedures and her trust in safety systems. She now works as a corporate safety trainer for a manufacturing company in Miami, but she has developed severe anxiety around water and refuses to travel on any type of boat or ship. The Allure of the Seas continues its Caribbean cruises with enhanced safety monitoring systems and additional backup controls for lifeboat operations. The safety drill procedures have been modified to include increased supervision and electronic monitoring of passenger behavior during evacuation exercises, but crew members report ongoing issues with lifeboat systems that occasionally show signs of unauthorized activation, and safety officers have been quietly briefed on protocols for managing passenger behavior during what Royal Caribbean classifies as anomalous drill responses. Elena Pedro still follows maritime safety news obsessively and has discovered disturbing patterns across the cruise industry. Safety officers who leave the maritime field after experiencing impossible equipment malfunctions, lifeboat systems that operate without human control, and emergency drills that result in passenger behavior that defies explanation. Sometimes late at night, she finds herself checking ocean current maps and weather reports for the Caribbean waters, where she once saw 500 passengers drifting in lifeboats that maritime authorities insist never existed. Let's Story 7 move to our seventh story, and this one will make you question reality itself. Our seventh story takes us to the communication center of the Royal Princess, where an officer received messages from the future that warned of disasters yet to come. David Kim had been working as a communications officer for 12 years when he encountered something that would force him into early medical retirement at the age of 35. As the senior communications specialist aboard Princess Cruises Royal Princess, David was responsible for maintaining all radio communications, satellite connections, and emergency communication systems during the ship's 7-day Alaska Inside Passage voyage from Seattle. His expertise in maritime communication technology had been developed through extensive training with the Federal Communications Commission and years of experience managing complex communication networks on some of the cruise industry's most sophisticated vessels. David held advanced certifications in maritime radio operations, satellite communication systems, and emergency broadcasting protocols. He was fluent in English, Korean, and Japanese, making him valuable for communicating with international maritime authorities and coordinating with vessels from various countries during the ship's passage through Alaskan waters. His colleagues respected his technical knowledge and his ability to maintain clear communication links, even during challenging weather conditions in some of the world's most remote waters. The Royal Princess was one of Princess Cruises' Grand-Ass ships, carrying 3,600 passengers and 1,200 crew members through the pristine wilderness of Alaska's Inside Passage, visiting ports, including Juneau, Skagway, and Ketchikan. David's communication center was located on Deck 9, equipped with state-of-the-art radio equipment, satellite communication arrays, and redundant emergency systems designed to ensure constant contact with the U.S. Coast Guard and other vessels operating in Alaskan waters. But on the night of September 18, 2021, during what should have been a routine voyage through the Lynn Canal towards Skagway, David would encounter something that challenged everything he thought he knew about communication technology and the nature of time itself. It began at 11:42 p.m. during a severe storm that had developed unexpectedly as the ship navigated through the narrow waterways between towering mountains and glacial fjords. The storm had intensified rapidly, with winds reaching 45 knots and waves building to 15 knots. Unusual conditions for the typically protected waters of the Inside Passage. David was monitoring multiple communication channels, maintaining contact with the Coast Guard station in Juneau, and coordinating with other vessels in the area to ensure safe passage through the increasingly dangerous weather conditions. At 11:55 p.m., David lost all satellite communication with the outside world. His primary satellite array showed technical failure across all channels. His backup satellite system displayed error messages he had never seen before, and his emergency communication equipment indicated complete signal loss from all satellites in the region. According to his instruments, the Royal Princess had become completely isolated from all external communication networks. Bridge. This is communications, David reported to Captain Lisa Morrison. We've lost all satellite communication capabilities. I'm showing complete system failure across all external communication channels. We're effectively cut off from all shore-based communication. Captain Morrison's response was immediate. David, that's impossible. We have redundant systems specifically designed to prevent total communication blackout. Keep working to restore contact. But as David worked frantically to restore communication links, something even more disturbing began happening. His radio equipment started receiving transmissions that should have been impossible, given the complete satellite failure he was experiencing. The transmissions were coming through clearly on multiple frequencies, but they contained information that defied all logic. At 12:17 a.m., David received a clear radio transmission on the emergency frequency. Royal Princess, this is Coast Guard Station Juneau. We're receiving your distress signal regarding the engine room fire that will occur in 47 minutes. Emergency response teams are being dispatched to your location. David immediately contacted the bridge. Captain, I just received a transmission from the Coast Guard about an engine room fire, but we don't have any engine room problems. They're claiming we sent a distress signal that I never transmitted. Captain Morrison's confusion was evident in her response. David, that makes no sense. Check Allure Systems and confirm our actual status. David conducted a complete ship status check and confirmed that all systems were operating normally. There were no fires, no engine problems, no emergencies of any kind. But the Coast Guard transmissions continued, providing detailed information about crisis situations that hadn't occurred on the Royal Princess. At 12:34 a.m., another transmission came through. Royal Princess, this is Coast Guard Rescue Helicopter 652. We have visual confirmation of passengers in the water at coordinates you provided. Beginning search and rescue operations for the 43 passengers who went overboard during the lifeboat malfunction that occurred 18 minutes ago. David checked his passenger manifest and confirmed that all passengers were accounted for and safely in their cabins. There had been no lifeboat malfunction, no passengers overboard, no rescue operations requested yet. The Coast Guard was clearly responding to emergencies that existed only in their radio transmissions. The most disturbing transmission came at 1:03 a.m. Royal Princess. This is David Kim from your communication center. I'm transmitting from Life Raft number 4. The ship sank at 12:47 a.m. after the collision with a submerged iceberg. We have 340 survivors in lifeboats requesting immediate rescue. Please respond to confirm you received this transmission. David stared at his radio equipment in shock. He was hearing his own voice, transmitting a distress call from a life raft describing the sinking of the ship he was currently aboard. The voice was unmistakably his own. But he was sitting safely in his communication center on a ship that was floating normally through Alaskan waters. Bridge, this is David. I need you to come to the communication center immediately. I'm receiving impossible transmissions that require your personal verification. When Captain Morrison arrived 5 minutes later, David played back the recorded transmissions he had received. The captain listened with growing alarm as she heard detailed descriptions of emergencies that hadn't occurred. Rescue operations for situations that didn't exist. In David's own voice calling for help from a life raft. David, this is impossible. These transmissions describe events that haven't happened, but the voices are clearly identified Coast Guard personnel I've worked with for years, and that's definitely your voice in the final transmission. How can you be receiving radio calls from yourself? Captain Morrison contacted the Coast Guard station in Juneau directly, but they reported no knowledge of any transmissions to or from the Royal Princess and confirmed that no emergency operations were underway in their area. For the next 6 hours, as the storm continued to rage around the Royal Princess, David received increasingly detailed transmissions describing disasters that seemed to exist in some parallel timeline where the ship encountered every possible emergency simultaneously. He heard his own voice coordinating evacuations, describing technical failures and requesting rescue operations for catastrophes that never occurred in his reality. The transmissions provided technical details that David had never learned, described emergency procedures he had never studied, and referenced equipment failures using terminology that didn't exist in any manual he had ever read. Most disturbing was that the version of himself speaking from the transmissions seemed to have knowledge of future events, warning about problems that would develop hours before they actually began to manifest on the real ship. At 6:23 a.m., David received a final transmission that ended his career. David, this is you speaking from 6:30 a.m. In 7 minutes, you're going to suffer a complete nervous breakdown from the stress of receiving these impossible communications. You'll be found unconscious at your communication station by Captain Morrison, and you'll never work on a ship again. Thank you for listening to your future, and goodbye. Minutes later, at exactly 6:30 a.m., Captain Morrison found David unconscious at his communication station. He was hospitalized in Juneau with what doctors described as acute psychological exhaustion and was never able to return to maritime communication work. The investigation that followed involved Princess Cruises Technical Division, the Federal Communications Commission, and communications specialists, whose credentials David was never allowed to examine. All of the radio transmissions she claimed to have received were dismissed as hallucinations, caused by stress and sleep deprivation during the storm. The technical investigators found no evidence of unusual radio activity, nor recorded transmissions matching David's descriptions, and no system malfunctions that could explain his claims. The communication equipment was tested extensively and found to be operating within normal parameters throughout the night of the alleged incident. Princess Cruises offered David full medical, disability benefits, and early retirement with a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The terms prohibited him from discussing the September 18th incident with other maritime professionals, communication specialists, or federal authorities. David now works as a technical writer for a small electronics company in his hometown of Portland, Oregon, but he has never fully recovered from his experience aboard the Royal Princess. He suffers from chronic insomnia and has developed an irrational fear of radio equipment, often hearing phantom transmissions from devices that aren't even turned on. The Royal Princess continues its Alaska cruises with a new communications officer. The communication center where David worked has been equipped with enhanced psychological support systems and additional backup communication equipment. But crew members report that radio operators occasionally receive strange transmissions during severe weather, and the ship's communication logs contain unexplained entries that appear to describe events that never occurred. David Kim still monitors maritime communication frequencies obsessively from his home, searching for similar incidents and hoping to find other communication officers who have received impossible transmissions. Sometimes late at night, he hears his own voice on emergency frequencies, calling for help from disasters that exist only in the space between radio waves and the uncertain boundary between present and future time. Let's move to our 8th story, and this one will make story 8 you never want to attend another cruise ship show. Our 8th story brings us to the entertainment deck, where performance becomes pure terror. This one happened in the main theater of the Carnival Horizon, where actors performed scenes they never rehearsed. Rebecca had been working as an entertainment director for 6 years when she encountered something that would force her to leave the cruise industry forever at the age of 28 as the senior entertainment coordinator aboard Carnival Cruise Line's Carnival Horizon. Rebecca was responsible for producing and managing all theatrical performances, variety shows, and live entertainment during the ship's 7-day Southern Caribbean voyage from Miami. Her expertise in cruise ship entertainment had been developed through a degree in theater arts from New York University and years of experience managing complex productions on some of the industry's most demanding performance schedules. Rebecca was known throughout the Carnival fleet for her creativity organizational skills, and ability to manage the diverse group of international performers who made up modern cruise ship entertainment teams. She spoke English, Spanish, and French fluently, allowing her to work effectively with singers, dancers, and technical crew members from around the world. Her colleagues respected her ability to handle the unique challenges of producing Broadway-quality shows in the confined spaces of a ship's theater, while dealing with seasickness, technical limitations, and the constant turnover of cruise ship performers. The Carnival Horizon was one of Carnival's Vista-class ships, carrying 3D-900 passengers and 1,400 crew members through the turquoise waters of the Southern Caribbean, visiting ports including Barbados, St. Lucia, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, Trinidad and Tobago, and St. Kitts and Nevis, Lucia and Aruba. Rebecca's main theater was located on decks 3 and 4, a sophisticated venue with 200 seats, professional lighting systems, and acoustic engineering designed to rival land-based theaters. The facility included full backstage areas, dressing rooms, and technical equipment capable of supporting elaborate musical productions and variety shows. But on the night of December 5, 2019, during what should have been a routine performance of the ship's signature variety show, Caribbean Dreams, Rebecca would encounter something that challenged everything she thought she knew about theatrical performance and the nature of artistic expression. It began at 8:00 p.m., when Rebecca took her position in the theater's lighting booth to coordinate the evening's entertainment for an audience of nearly 200 passengers. The show was one that Rebecca had produced dozens of times before, a 90-minute variety performance featuring the ship's resident singers, dancers, and specialty acts performing popular songs and dance numbers with a Caribbean theme. The cast included 8 performers from different countries who had been working together for 6 months and knew the show's choreography, music, and dialogue perfectly. The performance began normally with the opening number, Island Paradise, featuring all 8 performers in colorful Caribbean costumes singing and dancing to a medley of calypso and reggae music. Rebecca watched from her technical booth as the audience enjoyed the familiar entertainment, and everything proceeded according to the detailed production schedule she had created. But at 8:23 p.m., 23 minutes into the show, something went wrong during the transition between the 3rd and 4th musical numbers. Instead of beginning the scheduled song Tropical Sunrise, the performer suddenly launched into a dramatic scene that Rebecca had never seen before, performing dialogue and movements that weren't part of any show in her repertoire. The lead singer, Maria Rodriguez from Spain, began speaking in perfect English with an accent Rebecca had never heard her use. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're going to perform something special tonight. Something that happened right here in this very theater 3 years ago." The other performers arranged themselves on stage in positions that weren't part of any choreography Rebecca had ever created. Rebecca immediately tried to contact the performers through their wireless headset systems, but her communications weren't getting through. The performers seemed to be following some other director's instructions that Rebecca couldn't hear or intercept. She watched in growing confusion as her carefully trained cast began, performing a scene that appeared to be completely improvised yet perfectly coordinated. The performers began acting out what appeared to be a dramatic recreation of a maritime disaster. They portrayed passengers and crew members during what looked like a ship evacuation using dialogue and staging that was far more sophisticated than anything in Rebecca's shows. The performance was compelling and professionally executed, but it depicted events that Rebecca was certain had never occurred on the Carnival Horizon. Maria Rodriguez, still speaking in the unfamiliar accent, addressed the audience directly. On December 5, 2016, in this very theater, during a performance just like this one, 347 passengers lost their lives when the emergency evacuation system malfunctioned. We're going to show you exactly what happened, so you'll know what to expect when it happens. Again, Rebecca frantically checked her production notes in the ship's historical records. December 5, 2016 was exactly 3 years earlier. But according to all documentation, the Carnival Horizon had been launched in 2018. The ship hadn't even existed in 2016, making the performers' claims about a previous disaster impossible. Yet they continued their unauthorized performance with disturbing accuracy and professionalism. The 8 performers began depicting an emergency evacuation scenario, with technical knowledge that exceeded anything Rebecca had taught them. Thus demonstrated safety procedures, described escape routes, and acted out passenger reactions with the expertise of trained maritime safety specialists. The audience watched with growing alarm as the performance became increasingly realistic and frightening. At 8:47 p.m., the performers began portraying the deaths of passengers trapped in the theater during an emergency. The staging was sophisticated and emotionally powerful, but it depicted safety failures and evacuation breakdowns that Rebecca knew were impossible given the ship's actual safety systems. Yet the performers demonstrated detailed knowledge of the theater's construction, emergency exits, and safety equipment that they shouldn't have possessed. Rebecca tried to stop the performance by cutting power to the stage lighting and sound systems, but the performers continued without missing a beat, as if they were being lit and amplified by equipment that Rebecca couldn't control. The audience remained seated, apparently unable or unwilling to leave the theater despite the increasingly disturbing content of the unauthorized show. The most terrifying moment came when the performers began calling individual audience members by name, describing their cabin numbers, dining preferences, and personal information that the entertainment staff would never have access to. They portrayed the deaths of specific passengers who were sitting in the audience, acting out their final moments with disturbing accuracy and emotional intensity. Mrs. Jennifer Collins from cabin 6247, Maria Rodriguez called out, pointing directly at a woman in the third row. "You'll try to reach the portside emergency exit, but the corridor will be blocked by debris from the structural collapse. You'll spend your final 7 minutes trapped between decks 3 and 4, calling for your husband, Robert, who will already be unconscious in the main lobby." Rebecca watched in horror as Mrs. Collins appeared to recognize herself in the performance, her face showing terror and recognition of details that should have been impossible for the performers to know. The woman tried to leave her seat but seemed unable to move, as if some force was compelling her to remain and watch her own predicted demise. For the next 43 minutes, the performers continued their unauthorized show, depicting in graphic detail the deaths of passengers throughout the theater. They described structural failures, safety system malfunctions, and evacuation breakdowns with technical accuracy that would have required years of maritime engineering training to understand. At 9:30 p.m., 90 minutes after the show had begun, the performers suddenly stopped their disturbing performance and returned to their original positions for the scheduled finale of Caribbean Dreams. They completed the show's final number exactly as Rebecca had choreographed it, as if the previous hour of unauthorized performance had never occurred. When the curtain closed and the audience began to leave, Rebecca rushed backstage to confront her performers. But when she asked them about the unauthorized performance, all 8 cast members looked at her with genuine confusion. "Rebecca, what unauthorized performance?" asked Maria Rodriguez, speaking in her normal Spanish accent. "We performed Caribbean Dreams exactly as scheduled. The show went perfectly. The audience loved it. Did you see something different from the lighting booth?" Rebecca reviewed the video recordings from the theater's documentation cameras, but the footage showed only the standard 90-minute performance of Caribbean Dream, with no unauthorized scenes or disturbing content. According to the recorded evidence, the performers had executed the show exactly as scheduled, and the audience had enjoyed a normal evening of cruise ship entertainment. The investigation that followed involved Carnival's entertainment division, maritime safety inspectors, and psychological specialists, whose credentials Rebecca was never allowed to examine. She was interviewed extensively about her mental state, her relationship with the performers, and her interpretation of events that no one else claimed to have witnessed. Rebecca was informed that she had experienced acute stress-induced hallucinations combined with false memory syndrome, caused by the pressures of managing complex entertainment productions. The investigators explained that her mind had created elaborate false memories of events that had never occurred, triggered by her subconscious fears about passenger safety and entertainment responsibilities. Carnival offered Rebecca a transfer to shore-based entertainment consulting with full benefits and early retirement contingent on signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement. The terms prohibited her from discussing the December 5th incident with other entertainment professionals, maritime authorities, or media outlets. Rebecca reluctantly accepted the offer and now works as a corporate event planner in Orlando, Florida, but she has never returned to theatrical work. The incident destroyed her confidence in live performance and her trust in her own perceptions. She suffers from chronic nightmares about passengers trapped in theaters and has developed severe anxiety around large audiences. The Carnival Horizon continues its Caribbean cruises with a new entertainment director. The main theater where Rebecca worked has been equipped with enhanced audio-visual recording equipment and additional psychological support resources for entertainment staff. But crew members report that performers occasionally break into unauthorized scenes during shows and theater. Staff have been quietly briefed on protocols for managing what Carnival classifies as performance deviation incidents. Rebecca still follows cruise ship entertainment news obsessively and has discovered disturbing patterns across the industry. Entertainment directors who leave the maritime field after experiencing impossible performance situations shows that depict events that never occurred, and audiences who report seeing performances that weren't officially scheduled, sometimes late at night. She finds herself researching the construction dates of cruise ships, trying to verify whether the Carnival Horizon could have existed in 2016 and whether 347 passengers really died in a theater that may not have been built yet. Let's move to our final story, and this one involves the highest authority story 9 on any ship. Our 9th story takes us to the bridge of the Costa Fortuna, where a veteran captain discovered that his ship was navigating to places that don't exist. Captain Miguel Santos had been commanding cruise ships for 25 years when he encountered something that would force him into early retirement at the age of 52. As the master of Costa Cruises' Costa Fortuna, Miguel was responsible for safely navigating one of the Mediterranean's most popular cruiser routes, carrying 3,470 passengers and 100 crew members from Barcelona through the French Riviera, Italian coast, and Greek islands. Heiss' expertise in Mediterranean navigation had been developed through decades of experience in some of the world's most challenging waters, and his impeccable safety record had made him one of Costa's most trusted captains. Miguel held a Master Mariner's license from the Spanish Maritime Authority and had commanded vessels ranging from cargo ships to luxury cruise liners before joining Costa's fleet. He was fluent in Spanish, Italian, English, and French, essential skills for navigating the international waters of the Mediterranean and communicating with port authorities across multiple countries. His colleagues respected his meticulous attention to navigation safety and his ability to handle the complex logistics of managing a floating city through some of Europe's busiest shipping lanes. The Costa Fortuna was one of Costa's Concordia-class ships, a sophisticated vessel equipped with the most advanced navigation technology available to the cruise industry. Miguel's bridge was located on Deck 10, featuring state-of-the-art GPS systems, radar arrays, electronic chart displays, and satellite communication equipment designed to ensure precise navigation through the Mediterranean's complex coastlines and heavily trafficked waters. But on the morning of October 28, 2018, during what should have been a routine voyage from Barcelona to Sevilla, Miguel would encounter something that challenged everything he thought he knew about navigation and the fundamental nature of geography itself. It began at 6:15 a.m. during Miguel's routine review of the overnight navigation logs while the ship sailed through calm Mediterranean waters toward the Italian coast. Miguel's standard morning procedure involved checking the ship's position, reviewing weather reports, and confirming the day's navigation plan with his officers. The Costa Fortuna was following a well-established route that Miguel had navigated hundreds of times before, maintaining a steady course toward Civitavecchia, where passengers would disembark for tours of Rome and Vatican City. But when Miguel checked the ship's GPS position display, he discovered something that defied all logic. According to the navigation system, the Costa Fortuna was positioned at coordinates that placed the ship in the middle of the African desert, approximately 200 meters south of Cairo, Egypt. The GPS readings showed latitude and longitude numbers that would put the vessel on dry land thousands of miles from any body of water. Navigation Officer Rodriguez checked our GPS systems and compass and visual landmarks, but the diagnostic results were even more disturbing than the original GPS malfunction. Every navigation system on the bridge was showing different impossible locations for the Costa Fortuna. The radar system indicated they were positioned in the Swiss Alps. The magnetic compass pointed to coordinates in the middle of the Sahara Desert, and the satellite navigation backup system showed the ship located in downtown Paris, France. "Captain, this is impossible," Officer Rodriguez reported with obvious confusion. All our navigation systems are functioning normally according to their self-diagnostic routines, but they're showing completely different positions that are all geographically impossible for a cruise ship. Yet, when I look out the bridge windows, I can clearly see the Mediterranean coastline where it should be. Miguel stepped outside onto the bridge wing and confirmed that the ship was indeed sailing through normal Mediterranean waters. He could see the familiar coastline of southern France to the north, the distinctive landmarks he had used for navigation reference for decades. The sea conditions were normal, the weather was clear, and everything appeared exactly as it should during a routine morning passage toward Italy. But when Miguel returned to the navigation station, the situation had become even more impossible. The electronic chart display was now showing a detailed map of terrain that didn't exist on Earth. Underwater mountain ranges, island chains that appeared on no known charts, and coastal features that defied the established geography of the Mediterranean Sea. "Captain, look at this," Officer Rodriguez called urgently. "The chart system is displaying navigation routes to ports that don't exist. It's showing detailed harbor information, pilot station coordinates, and Port Authority contact numbers for places called New Atlantica, Deep Harbor Station, and Submerged Port Valencia. These locations have complete maritime information in our database, but they're not on any official charts." Miguel examined the impossible chart displays with growing alarm. The navigation system was providing detailed information about ports and harbors that appeared to be located hundreds of feet underwater, complete with depth soundings, approach routes, and docking procedures. The system treated these underwater locations as normal Mediterranean ports, offering the same level of detail and navigation assistance that would be provided for real destinations like Barcelona or Rome. At 7:30 a.m., the situation escalated beyond impossible into the realm of the supernatural. The ship's autopilot system engaged itself without authorization and began steering the Costa Fortuna toward one of the underwater ports shown on the navigation charts. Miguel immediately attempted to disengage the autopilot and regain manual control of the ship, but the steering system wouldn't respond to his commands. "All stop engines," Miguel ordered. But the engine room reported that the propulsion system was also operating under some kind of automatic control that they couldn't override. The Costa Fortuna continued on its unauthorized course toward coordinates that, according to the charts, would take them to a port located 400 ft beneath the Mediterranean Sea. Miguel activated the ship's emergency communication system and attempted to contact Italian maritime authorities. But the radio responses he received were more disturbing than the navigation failures. When he reached what should have been the Italian Coast Guard, the voice that responded was speaking in a language he didn't recognize, providing detailed instructions for docking procedures at the underwater port of New Atlantica. "Costa Fortuna. This is New Atlantica Harbor Control," came the transmission in perfectly clear Italian, though Miguel was certain he had contacted the standard Italian Coast Guard frequency. "You are cleared for approach to berth 7 underwater dock level 3, submerged to 400 ft and maintain current heading. Diving procedures will be automated upon arrival at the descent coordinates." Miguel checked and rechecked his radio equipment, but according to all his instruments, he was communicating on standard maritime emergency frequencies with legitimate Coast Guard authorities. Yet, the instructions he was receiving were for navigation procedures that would sink his ship and kill everyone aboard. For the next 3 hours, as the Costa Fortuna continued its automated course toward the impossible destination, Miguel documented navigation readings that challenged his understanding of physics and geography. The ship's depth sounder began showing impossible underwater terrain, cities, harbors, and infrastructure that appeared to exist hundreds of feet beneath the Mediterranean Sea, complete with what looked like operational ports and shipping facilities. At 10:45 a.m., Miguel made the decision that would end his career. He activated the ship's general alarm and announced a navigation emergency to all passengers and crew. "This is Captain Santos. We are experiencing a complete navigation system failure that has compromised our ability to maintain safe course and position. All passengers and crew should prepare for potential emergency procedures." The response from Costa Cruises' corporate headquarters was immediate and devastating. Within minutes, Miguel received direct communication from the company's crisis management team, ordering him to cancel the emergency alert and continue normal operations. But when Miguel explained the navigation anomalies and unauthorized course changes, the corporate response defied his understanding of maritime safety protocols. Captain Santos, our satellite tracking shows the Costa Fortuna maintaining normal course and position towards Civitavecchia. All our monitoring systems indicate standard navigation parameters with no anomalies or system failures. Cancel the emergency alert immediately and continue scheduled operations. Miguel was forced to watch as his ship's automated systems continued steering toward underwater coordinates, while Costa's corporate monitoring system showed normal navigation. The conflict between what he was experiencing on the bridge and what the company was seeing from their satellite tracking created an impossible situation that had no resolution. In standard maritime procedures, at 2:15 p.m., just as the navigation system indicated the ship was approaching the descent coordinates for the underwater port, all the navigation anomalies suddenly stopped. The GPS systems returned to showing the correct Mediterranean position. The autopilot disengaged and the electronic charts displayed normal geographical features. The Costa Fortuna resumed its scheduled course towards Civitavecchia as if nothing unusual had ever occurred. The investigation that followed was swift and comprehensive. Costa's technical division, maritime navigation specialists, and Italian maritime authorities conducted extensive testing of all the ship's navigation equipment. Every system was found to be functioning normally with no evidence of the malfunctions Miguel had reported. Miguel was informed that he had experienced acute stress-induced hallucinations combined with navigation system misinterpretation caused by the pressures of commanding a large passenger vessel. The investigators explained that his reports of underwater ports and impossible navigation readings were symptoms of psychological fatigue that had caused him to misinterpret normal system displays. Costa offered Miguel early retirement with full pension benefits contingent on signing a comprehensive non-disclosure agreement that prohibited him from discussing the October 28th incident with other maritime professionals, navigation authorities, or safety organizations. Miguel reluctantly accepted the retirement package and now works as a sailing instructor at a small marina in Valencia, Spain, teaching navigation to recreational boers. But he has never stopped monitoring Mediterranean shipping traffic and has discovered disturbing patterns of navigation anomalies reported by other captains who were subsequently forced into early retirement. The Costa Fortuna continues its Mediterranean routes with a new captain. The bridge where Miguel worked has been equipped with enhanced backup navigation systems and additional psychological support resources for bridge officers. But crew members report that navigation systems occasionally display impossible readings during certain weather conditions, and the ship's officers have been quietly briefed on protocols for managing what Costa classifies as navigation interpretation errors. Captain Miguel Santos still monitors maritime navigation frequencies from his small sailing school, listening for other captains who might be experiencing impossible navigation readings. Sometimes late at night, he receives radio transmissions on emergency frequencies from ships requesting docking clearance at ports that exist only in the space between the surface of the sea and the mysterious cities that may be hidden in the depths below. These 9 stories represent just a fraction of the incidents that occur in the dark waters of the cruise industry every year. Maritime workers who have witnessed the unexplainable, passengers who have experienced the impossible, and ships that carry secrets far darker than the ocean depths they navigate. If you're a cruise ship worker with your own disturbing encounter, share it in the comments below. Every story will be investigated for potential future episodes. Your experience could be the next verified account featured on Mr. Nightveil. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Mr. Nightveil uploads spine-chilling verified maritime horror stories every week. If these accounts sent chills down your spine, smash that like button and share this video with anyone brave enough to hear the truth about what really happens on cruise ships. Thank you for joining me on this voyage into the unknown. Until next time, remember, the ocean keeps its secrets, but eternal driftle reveals them all. Stay vigilant and never trust the calm waters. This has been Eternal Drift. Sleep well, if you